Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the latest edition of RE341, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called Nap Time, written by MyNameMeansBentNose. And typical of persistent predators, they just don't stop. So they can run. That's not what I meant. You don't understand. Barely anyone does. Fine. Then you old gastropod, enlighten me. A pair of brilliant purple stalks swiveled away from the plate of inebriant cubes on the bench between them, swiveled, and looked into the bright green stalks that hadn't looked away. So they are made to function for a very long time. The old one started again. Many realize the joke of humanity and their depraved attraction to whatever catches their fantasy. The old joke, of course, being that they can go all night if they want, or all day, but it doesn't end there. I get that. Please advance to your point. Thing is, everyone misses the point. They hear pursuit, predator, and they think as you do, so they can run. And you are right to be skeptical of that statement. Who needs to run when one can float, or fly, or drive? So it's not about running. Now we're getting there. The tendril reached out to lazily absorb one of the cubes as the elder continued speaking. It isn't that they can run. It's that they can do any task they have their mind set on for countless hours. What's more, even at rest, their minds never entirely stop working. In this way, they can meet or beat the skills of those who have greater natural talent, even when they claim to be thinking of nothing. I've seen some strange ideas spring from their minds, as if from nowhere. Obviously, there was still some difficult-to-observe process in motion. So, it's not like they can outlast us for thinking. You think so? A purple tendril reached out and poked the base of a green eye stalk. Don't underestimate the energy costs of thinking, young slug. It takes more than from a sapient being to think out a hard problem than many realize. But these humans can do that on autopilot. I don't understand. You think all they are doing during the running is just that, running. They are also moved to think. A pacing human is a thinking human, and they spend countless hours enduring seemingly endless education. Did you know humans do not have racial memory? Wait, but all the humans I've met know so much. All picked up during their years of listening and working on active learning. How? How could they endure such a thing? Not all of them do. A human has to be engaged in some way to earn their full attention. They don't give that attention to just any old task. It can be a real commitment, but that leads to the next problem. Next problem? What happens to a race developed for constant action when they have nothing to do? The green eye stalks of the youth stared blankly. With a shake of his stripe, his own version of a sigh, he answered his question. They get bored. Bored? I've heard of that. I bet you have, but what is it like? Human boredom. Human boredom is the urge to do something, anything, other than what they are doing at the moment. Oh, the youngster replied, his expression blank. That doesn't sound that. It is bad. Boredom means their mind is unoccupied. You never know what an odd star-spawned idea will spring forth, and it only gets worse when that boredom is enforced via events outside their control. I can't imagine it, the youth admitted honestly. I understand, and any of us have little problem waiting for extended periods of time when forced. Make a human sit still, however, and you are inviting trouble, and you are giving that trouble time to plan. The young male's eyes had shrunk ever so slightly, a subtle sign of continued disbelief. So the old stuck continued. You know I was present at the rebuilding of HFY 3 after the end of the Crimean Pyrrhic War. The young male's eyes now extended with interest in an old story. I worked as an equipment operator on the first new construction drone factory in orbit around the planet, built in the new ring of the planet's shattered moon. You worked with humans, of course. They are comparatively tireless workers, although not nearly so relentless in peacetime as they were just a few galactic degrees earlier. The old purple slug absorbed another of the snack cubes as he considered how to explain it. This site was in orbit, of course, built deep into one of the largest moon fragments. All workers on site were kept in an attached work camp sunk into one of the best sheltered surface cavities. The camp and the work site were connected by rail at the time. That seems awkward. It was. I was to quickly learn that this project was much like many other human-led projects. Workers were arriving long before infrastructure had been built and long before appropriate materials had been delivered. I had never started a job that was not ready for me before, so it took time for me to adjust. The humans, down to the last, were annoyed, but unsurprised. This is when I began to learn of boredom. They weren't able to work, so they got bored. Yes, young one, that is what happened. They couldn't work, but they were trapped at work. So they made games or found shortcuts. Some events were innocent enough. A bored group in zero gravity with a bucket attached to a tether. They would take turns trying to lob rocks into the opening of the bucket. Or lacking enough back boots, the two humans would hold the third down, while that third pulled structure slowly into place before fastening it all together. With only work to do, they couldn't bear to be trapped in that place without something to occupy them. The green youngster's eyes began to sway with surprise as the stories continued. But the worst was Jenkins. Jenkins? He let his body flatten with relaxation to counter the tension that threatened to return out of memories. Yes, that was his nickname. I recall I wasn't his true name. But his human companions all stated he acts like a Jenkins, so that was his name. Strange. What was it he did? There are many things, but one truly stands out after the fact. Recall I mentioned the lack of infrastructure and the overabundance of workers? Yes, I was listening. Good. Anyway, one of the largest irritations was the magnetic rail to site. It wasn't a long trip, but it was the only way to the work site. The rail did not have the capacity to get everyone on site on scheduled times unless everything went perfectly. This did not happen. A problem compounded by various pointy-head bosses refusing to compromise in timing. This meant long waits for space on the overcapacity back rail and workers getting reprimanded for being late. Can you guess who had the worst of it? It was Jenkins, of course. Why else would you mention his name? True. And it was all for an extra nap. He hesitated as the young green's eyes shrunk again with confusion. Indeed, Jenkins loved his naps. You wouldn't think that a race so famed for endurance could sleep so much. But I've seen the man fall asleep in mid-conversation. He hated waiting for the rail more than anything else, especially since if he fell asleep waiting, then it was unlikely that he would catch his ride, making him even later. So he had to arrive early to stay awake and bored. This man who so loved to sleep took the problems with the rail as a personal insult, especially when I know he was marched into his superior's office multiple times. But it was an ordeal to make it into work on time in the first place, you said. That doesn't seem fair. Yes, and that was what saved Jenkins from job termination in the first place. Although that was not what saved him in the end. What happened? What did he do? Well, Jenkins found a way to get to work on time without losing sleep and broke many rules at the same time. The young male's eyes were now fully extended. Jenkins did a handful of things. The first was to sabotage the locator beacon on the environmental suit. He figured out how to make it detachable so that he could avoid notice when he needed to. Then I can only assume that he bribed someone for access keys or found an unlisted access from a camp that offered him a hiding place. A hiding place? For his suit. You see, workers were expected to remove their uncomfortable company-supplied environmental suits at the work site and travel the mag rail to camp in civilian garb. Jenkins, however, took to wearing his suit during the trip to avoid being late. Wouldn't that annoy someone? Not if no one noticed. For Jenkins had rigged a safe spot on the outside of the mag rail where he could ride in his environmental suit. He would do this whenever he came from or went to camp, letting him avoid wait times entirely. That That is dangerous, foolish, crazy. Yes, it was many of those things. But he couldn't handle the boredom or the inability to sleep. So when his life gave him time to think, he used all of that time to find a solution. What happened when they caught him? Well, they didn't. They found his rig on the mag rail after a very much delayed inspection. That didn't happen until the second mag rail was finally built, at which point he didn't need it anymore. Camp security looked long and hard for the person that did it, but I didn't hear until the job was over about who was responsible. Camp security didn't like it. Of course not. He broke many rules. Unpermitted access to the camp, unlicensed modifications to the mag rail, and then unpermitted travel to the work site, unlicensed use of company environment suits and mag boots, unlicensed modification of stolen environment suit. He didn't use his own for the trip. I'm sure there was more rules he was breaking, but any one of those would have him removed from the job instantly. And they never found out. How did you know? Well, the Christian management never found out because the other humans didn't want to cooperate. One of those humans explained the whole thing to me on my trip home after the job ended. It turned out every single human knew. All of them. And none of them reported Jenkins, not a one. But why? Because it was amusing to them, and they too were bored. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholtz, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.